Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to day 2 of the launch of my new book of Sheaves and Stars. As you can see, has been out on Amazon officially since yesterday, and we've been having a free download promotional going on through Saturday. So definitely click on that free download button, even if you want to purchase the hardcover or the ebook. And if you have read the excerpt from my email list, definitely leave a review. All of that, clicking the download button and the review, those things help with the book's visibility on Amazon even more than purchasing does. So I just can't get over how pretty the cover is. Definitely pick one up. It's actually not as thick as my other books, so it's not as intimidating a read, but I was very impressed with a lot of my friends who sped through my first books a lot faster. But anyway, welcome to my office. This is where I work my day job and do most of my writing. And today I wanted to do something that I have done for my other books. The first time I did it with Paper Raven, who is my publisher, but we will not be able to do it together with them in a conversational format today. But I continued the tradition of doing kind of an interview with myself for each book, the way Paper Raven did with me the first time when I published My Brother the King. So Paper Raven had sent me some questions that I have not really looked at yet. I mean, I've answered them for the other books, but I wanted it to be more of a spontaneous interview discussion today. So if you are interested in some of the backstory of the book, these are the questions that my publisher sent me for kind of like an interview to introduce the book. So since it's launch week, this seemed appropriate. So I will be looking over there at some of the questions that they sent. The first question is kind of threefold that Paper Raven sent. What is this book about? Who did you write this for? And when did you know you were going to write it? So just to recap for anyone who might be new or not familiar with the story of Joseph, this is a biblical fiction book based on the life of Joseph in Genesis. Joseph was a young man who God gifted as a dreamer, a dream interpreter, but at a very young age, he had his own dreams of his family bowing to him that made his brothers very jealous, and his 10 older half-brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt, and his epic journey has become a classic story over the years, but it actually did happen. It's part of scriptural history, and Joseph was lifted out of slavery by God's grace and made the ruler of Egypt, and from there he was able to confront his brothers and actually save their lives, save the nations of Egypt and Israel as their provider during a famine. So that's kind of the arc of Joseph's story. But this book, more importantly, as I've said before with biblical fiction, it's important that you have your own angle. And it's important that you honor what the Bible is saying and also decide what about this story really grips me. What is it that I want to know more about? And then what revelations have I received that I want to share with the world? Because that's going to be kind of like the guiding light throughout your story. That's what's going to give it continuity, and people will be able to tell if you know what the meaning is. And it's not, because a story is not just a series of events. There's a meaning that's tying through it all. There's the overarching meaning, the application for us. There's what the character is going through, inside and outside conflict, all of that. So when I first fell in love with this story, I was 9 or 10 years old, and I was already like scribbling little stories and stuff. And it actually was not until my teen years that I decided that I wanted to write a retelling of the story of Joseph, when, biblical fiction and writing became more serious of a thing for me. But I was always attracted to his story because it was such a story of like so much violence and so much victimization, and yet he persevered. But it wasn't just him being a superhero and persevering. It was the fact that he, like at every turn throughout scripture, you can see how Joseph his focus on God was what he held to, and that's what kept him from falling apart. He still could have gotten through slavery and become a ruler without a relationship with God, but he would have been a bitter, angry man. And who knows if he would have actually made the impact that God intended for him to have. So I fell in love with the story because of Joseph's personal struggles, and I was just enthralled by the fact that scripture has such few words to say, but reading between the lines of the narrative, there's all these chunks of time where you don't hear what's going on with Joseph. So like there were years and years of just daily grind that Joseph had to go through in slavery and in prison that scripture doesn't tell us much about. It just gives us little hints. But that was intriguing to me, and I wanted to explore that. So my novel is a very inner exploration of Joseph. I tell people, compared to my other characters, he doesn't talk as much out loud, but he does a lot of inner processing. And it's basically the story of him going through different layers of surrender. Because that's honestly the only way that we can be used by God. And he lets us grow steadily at our own pace, but he's constantly calling to us. He's constantly saying, let go of your own understanding and embrace mine, and I will show you more than you could have imagined. One of my favorite writers, Catherine Wolfe, says, when you let go of what you thought you deserved, you're given more than you can imagine. So that is totally the case with Joseph. So that's what the book is about on a deeper level. And I honestly didn't think about who I was writing it for initially. Initially, I was writing it for myself because I had heard the quote that said, if you don't see the book that you want on the shelves, you write it. And for many, many years, I didn't see a lot of biblical fiction about Joseph on the shelves. And I started to see it more and more over the years. And ironically, again, this is where I really have to trust God, because this is not how I would have chosen for it to go. This particular past year that I have been working on publishing of Sheaves and Stars, for some reason, everybody has been publishing a book about Joseph. And we're talking like famous, traditionally published authors and previously unknown indie authors that are self-publishing. And you know, I haven't read any of them. I haven't really looked into any of them, but I definitely would not have chosen, since I've been working on it my whole life. It feels very, now to publish it now, it looks like I'm just jumping on a bandwagon, but I've been at this a lot longer than people can tell. But I really do believe that God's timing is at hand, and I just have to trust that. Until I started actually planning, maybe a couple of years ago, to actually take the scribblings of my youth and actually make a manuscript, now that I knew how to do it, that's when I started thinking about who is this actually for besides me. My first attempts were I was an immature writer. It was very self-indulgent. But now, you know, I care more about craft, and I care more about, making something that actually has meaning to it. And so honestly, I would say this book is for, whether you know the biblical story or not, it's for people that are drawn to that rags to riches story, but who need to understand how God works in the nitty-gritty everyday grind, where we don't know that these big momentous moments are coming. Like, for instance, a lot of us don't take a lot of comfort from rags to riches stories anymore, because we feel like, well, that's nice for them. It's nice that everything worked out for them in the end. But in the midst of my story, I don't know how it's going to work out. Well, Joseph was the same way. He didn't know how it was going to work out either. And so I really wrote this story for people who need to see how God works in the everyday, and how he's after our hearts and he won't let go. And he's asking us to seek him every day, and how when we seek him, that's when we are filled up. That's when we get the strength. It's not about becoming some superhuman on our own, but it's about, leaning into what we do know, leaning into a relationship with God that keeps us steady even when circumstances are chaotic. I'm just obsessed with the reality that, and I'm still learning it myself, I'm obsessed with the reality that you do not have to be trapped just because you feel trapped. Just because your circumstances are crazy doesn't mean you don't have anywhere to stand. And Joseph did that day after day after day, standing on the truth of the Lord, even when he had no idea if he was ever going to be free. So that kind of hopefully answers all three of those questions. The next question is, why do you feel like now is the right time for this book? And I mentioned before, that's kind of a bittersweet question for me, because in my flesh, I don't think that the best time for me to be launching my precious book that I've worked so hard on for so long. I didn't think it was a perfect time when I couldn't believe it. I was like, what kind of irony is this, when I saw person after person and then all of these just releasing these books, and then all of these people that I wanted to notice my book and I wanted to share my book with, they're just posting about how great this book is and how great that book is. It's really hard, especially because I've been at this a long time. It's not like a sudden decision. And I was talking to God about it, and he said, basically, I just have to trust him. But he said specifically, this is the right time for this book for other reasons besides just me. But when it comes to me, it's the right time for this book because based on this past year that I was writing it in 2022, that I was finalizing what is this book, was the hardest year of my life on so many different levels. And for me, that's not ideal. I would rather have, I would rather write in a setting that's a lot more enjoyable. But God said, what you have learned up to this point, it was definitely the right time. You've woven that, the things you've learned into the book. And after a certain point, he's like, no amount of time after this would make it better. Like it's time to just release it. Sometimes when you've been sitting on something for a long time, and then you finally learned some things, made some progress, it's time to just do it. And over the course of last year, finishing it and deciding how and where to publish it, Paper Raven really worked with me very well, but it was a different experience than my other novels. And because I know more about the industry now, it was, very discouraging on top of what else I was going through. But God made it clear to me over and over again, this is the time for this. And I'm excited because I know that the impact that I can't see is going to unfold in ways that I couldn't imagine. Question 3, what was your actual writing process like? It's hard to pin it down because it's taken so many years and it's gone through so many different iterations. It's evolved. So it started as like a youth when I was still learning to write just by reading. I was an avid reader, but my scribblings were very self-indulgent, and it was just basically me living out all of my thoughts about the story and trying to decide, and then as I got a bit older and learned more about writing and about biblical fiction, I started paying more attention to the rules of the genre and deciding, okay, what do I want to do with this officially? Whose perspective do I want? Around 2018, I wrote what is now the prologue of this book. And over the next several years, I played around with lots of different versions. And I even played around with one of the biggest things that I had to work through was deciding where to start the story. And no matter what, that prologue was definitely a guiding light from the Lord, because the prologue was something that God gave me while I was laid up at home after an accident, and it just I was spending a lot of time with the Lord, and the prologue just came out. And no matter how many different versions the book has gone through since 2018, I have not been able to get rid of the prologue. And I was always came back to the fact that no matter what the rest of the story is like, this prologue has to stay. And it just sort of establishes Joseph as a character, establishes the role that God is going to play in all of this as the main player, and then the dreams that Joseph has. So the prologue was kind of the guiding light, because I went through so many different versions, including a split time version. And one of the biggest decisions was, how much of Joseph's childhood do I include? Where do I start it? Do I start it in the very beginning of his life? And that's something I think that immature writers, because this is how I thought in the beginning. When I first was learning to write, I was more immature, and I thought that every story had to begin when a character was born, or when a character was like a little child. But Joseph's story, that made the story so long, and it actually didn't establish him as a very likable character. And so I think in 2019 or so, I started in a different spot, and I tried 2019 or 20. I started, I took a break from my other novel series that I was working on, and I just started somewhere else. I started somewhere new. I started right in the middle of the action at the pit when his brothers are betraying him. And that seemed to work best. And I tried to do other things because I wanted to make it unique and cool. And finally, I after a lot of back and forth and a lot of talk with the Lord, I decided I want to fall back on what sounds like me. Like I don't want to throw away the work that I've done. I don't want to just rewrite it. I really want to honor, all the work that I've done over the years, and keep the heart and soul of what this thing is. I hope that makes sense, especially as you read it, but hopefully it'll give you some more appreciation for what went into this, because it was a lot of mental gymnastics. But I posted a video about how I get through decision fatigue, and that was definitely came out of the decisions I had to make for this book. But I would encourage you, it is possible to make it through those decisions. If you care enough about the final product, if you take a step back and pray about it, and really, because writing is part of my journey with the Lord. So if you take a step back and just pray about it, and then remember, what am I actually doing? What am I actually trying to say? You'll get back to your purpose. That's why having a why, having an ultimate purpose is so important, because it's what you'll fall back on when you're trying to change everything up and do random things. Remember that it's not, you're not trying to, your writing will get messed up if you write to impress. If you write to impress someone, it's just not going to sound like you. You have got to decide what it is that you want to say, and then you've got to honor the story. You've got to work through the plot. You've got to work with the characters, get to know them, and then you end up being profound and original without trying. Profundity and originality is stuff that happens because you know the story and care about it. It doesn't happen because you force it to happen. What has launch week been like for you? How does it feel? How did you prepare? And then what advice would you give to your younger self about this process, or to others who are interested in this? This is going to be a bit of a longer video, so I'm going to try to wrap this up fairly quickly here. But launch week they're getting more and more difficult. My first one ever with My Brother the King was surreal and exciting, and I had so many, it was the first time I'd ever published a book, and so many people knew that this was a dream come true for me, and other people didn't have any idea that I even was a writer. And so there was so much anticipation, and people had been a part of the process and were waiting with bated breath. And so I got gifts sent to me. I had, so many comments and likes and texts, and there were so many downloads and so many reviews from day one. And after that, that was kind of like the pinnacle so far. And after that, launch days have become more and more difficult, because I'm paying more attention to what what is needed for a book to do well on Amazon and stuff like that. And I really, really care about this. This is not just something I'm just doing because I think I'm a great writer when I'm not, or because I just want something I've written to be out there. This is something that I deeply care about on a spiritual level, but also on a craft level. I care about, the words that are going out to people and what they're going to learn from it. I care about every detail of the process. I care about being a good writer. And if you've ever produced something like this, you know how it feels and how important it is to you. And I really, really don't want to be, it's a pride thing. It really is. I don't want to be viewed as someone that's just doing this for the heck of it. And there's this voice inside me that says, if you don't get a ton of attention and you don't get a ton of podcast invitations or you don't get picked up by a publisher, it invalidates all the work that you've done. And I don't want to talk about this for too long, but I don't want to gloss over it either. That's a very real feeling, and the imposter syndrome is very real in anything creative like this that you're putting out into the world. But again, it all comes back to, and this is how I prepare, and this is the advice I would give to anyone wanting to get into this. You have to fall back on your ultimate purpose as a Christian, which is to be a witness to the light that is Jesus. And if this is something that he has given you and he is helping you to get better at it and opening doors for you to do this, you have to trust him, and you have to believe that what he has put in your hands, he wants you to be effective with it. But it's not just about checking off boxes. It's not just about, oh God, help me to get to the next level, and then the next level, and then the next level, because then it becomes a rat race of just what I have and haven't accomplished, and it becomes competition. And the Bible specifically says, Paul said, I don't want to be planting in somebody else's garden. I want to be cultivating what God has given me. And yes, this industry does require us to compare ourselves a little bit because, the money side of it, you do have to think about that. Even with self-publishing, people are helping you and you're hiring people to do things that you can't do as a writer, and people have to get paid. And so you do, and the book has to get printed. And so you do have to think about it. So it's not like it doesn't matter, the money side, or like the notoriety side, but you will go insane unless you remember your purpose, unless you remember that, if this is something that God has given me, I need to remember that he cares about it. He cares about me, and he wants me to just enjoy it. He wants me to remember why I love it and to just proclaim him, get back into studying the Bible. Find a reason to remember every day why you love it and to celebrate what he has given you. So that's the advice I would give my younger self, or anyone that wants to get into writing and publishing. My advice is, if you've been, whether you've been writing or not, and you think you might want to be published one day, just start with writing. Fall in love with writing. Write about anything and everything. Fall in love with it. Do it as much as you can. And remember that if you're doing that, you are a writer, but you're going to have to get you're going to have to get good at writing. You're going to have to get good at just writing about anything and everything, so that you can kind of dig through all that fluff to get down to the bare bones of what you were meant to say as a person, and seek the Lord through all of it. Don't worry about the timing. Don't try to think, well, I've got to get good at all of these different aspects all at once. No, get good at writing first. You do not need a degree in writing to do this. But there's so much out there. Read like crazy. Take advantage of like all of the videos and the classes that are online for free. All of this information that's on YouTube about writing for free. There's information about dialogue and character and plot building. You can take a college course basically for free anywhere you want, but write and just seek the Lord about everything, and he will direct your paths. So I hope that this was informative and interesting to all of you, and I hope that you will pick up a copy of the book. buy it, download it, and review, please, because that really, really helps. And let me know what you think. Happy reading.